What's up, Dolphins? I'm Jim Grieshaber. Call me Gries. And with the coaching staff set for Jeff Hafley and the Miami Dolphins, some player movement begins to happen in the wide receiver room, getting shaken up a little bit with some big moves on the way.
Hey, Zgonina, happy Wednesday. Yes, the staff is set, but we may be losing one.
Yeah, it's Z kind of stole my thunder there. That unpopular hire turned out to be pretty popular with somebody, right? With Nathaniel Hackett potentially being poached already after less than a week since it's reported he's taking the QB coach job. So we'll get into all that and more.
Fins up. It's the Dolphins Squad. Everything Miami Dolphins every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from South Beach. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Sunshine, speed, and squad goals. The Dolphins Squad Show starts now.
All right. Gries, Z, and Kyle here on your Wednesday Dolphins Squad Show. And guys, it's good to see both of you. And man, the offseason, it's just cranking right now. The movement's been just dizzying. And now, of course, it's Super Bowl week. And we know what the NFL says there. Hey, we don't want too many headlines coming out Super Bowl week to take away from the game. So let's keep it and make it about the game, everybody, this week. But man, oh man, a busy week last week and into this week with coaching staffs and hires. And you guys both mentioned it in the intro. When you just start putting your staff together first time as a head coach and your guys are already getting poached, you're doing a pretty good job, Z.
Yeah, without a doubt. But, the funny part about it is, the rumor he's going to Arizona. He's the one that replaced Mike at the Jets as the coordinator. So it's kind of like the same thing that happened, in Green Bay with, Joe leaving and Half coming in, and on the same staff in Miami. So it's kind of ironic. I had a little chuckle when I read that. So we'll see what happens over the next week and a half.
Kyle, what are your thoughts on that? You said Z stole your thunder. I know you were coming with something there.
Yeah, it's strange bedfellows, right? With the when there's 10 head coaching positions that change, you have that much jumbling around position staff. Sometimes the guy that replaced you is not a bad option to put on your staff, right? It's happening in Miami with Jeff Hafley and Joe Barry, potentially Nathaniel Hackett, which I wouldn't blame him when you consider the stops he had in Buffalo, Jacksonville, and then Green Bay as an offensive coordinator. And then he gets the job in Denver, and that was a bad fit from the jump. And, Russell Wilson, kind of the full-on let Russ cook experience, and that didn't go particularly well and hasn't gone well no matter where Russ has gone since he left Seattle. And then obviously the 2 years in New York with the Jets, and I maintain nobody that I know is going to be the best versions of themselves in New York with the Jets versus any other destinations that they could land in across the league. And a chance to be, even if it's a non-play calling offensive coordinator for Hackett after last year in which he was a consult for Hafley on the defensive side with an offensive specialty, I think that'd be a good fit for him if he gets the opportunity to get that position. I wouldn't blame him. It kind of does put Miami in a little bit of a rock and a hard place as far as their quarterback coach, just because we said there's so many coaching staffs that are being turned over, and it's February 4th, right? So like, who's still out there? Who do you like that's still out there? Who do you still have connections with? Do you go with, I think the title that Darrell Bevell had before 2025 was the quarterback's close coach / passing game coordinator. You kind of combine those two things into one to kind of open your door for a bigger pool of candidates if you were going to hire somebody else as just quarterbacks coach to come over and come to Miami for a pay raise and a title bump.
What would you think of all that, Z? How would that work? I mean, would that be something, if you were Hafley, would you prefer to bring in another guy like Hackett, or would you, with what Kyle just said, would you be looking for someone maybe younger you could groom a little bit more if you don't get Hackett?
I think you got to find somebody that's going to fit the staff. This late in the game, you can't sit there and wait on somebody or whatever. It's about fitting in the staff, fitting in your vision. So I think Half's going to go that route. He's going to pick somebody he knows. I mean, that's what he's done so far on that staff. So he's going to lean on the guys in the room, get a bunch of names in the hat, and I'll pull one out and go with it.
It's what's interesting is that he was like by far the most accomplished assistant that was on the staff when you consider like the experience and being a head coach and all of the years. I mean, he's got like 10 plus years as offensive coordinator experience and as the quarterback's coach. And you think about Bobby Slowick's a young guy. Sean Duggan's a young guy. Now, Chris Tabor has 2 short stints as an interim head coach as the special teams coordinator, but the rest of that offensive staff is Yenser and Applebaum on the offensive line. We don't know who the tight end coach is going to be yet. Tyke Tolbert's a 20-plus year guy at wide receiver coach, but he's generally been just a wide receivers coach. So I think there's some experience that you're missing out on where if it were a perfect world and you do lose Hackett, I would like to hope that you find somebody with some higher up experience because, it's a loss that you're going to have and incur if Hackett goes elsewhere.
Dolphin fans really just didn't like this hire because he coached the Jets and he was terrible there. I mean, I think that's really all it is, Kyle. I really do.
Yeah, well, and then the stint in Denver, but again, I didn't take any exception to the hire because you didn't hire him to be the offensive coordinator and you didn't hire him to be the head coach of the football team. You hired him to be a quarterback coach. And with his background, he very clearly has earned 3-4 offensive coordinator opportunities for a reason. It's just how high up the ladder do you get before you stop being effective at all of the responsibilities that come. And I think he'd have been a great candidate for the experience that he has, the offensive coordinator and head coach experience that he has while being in a position coach role. I think that would have been a very good opportunity to put him in a position to maximize the best parts of him as a coach and then have that experience to lean on. So we'll see what ends up happening here.
Gries, one more thing. So, he's not really going, like if he does go to Arizona, he's not going into an unfamiliar situation, not calling the plays, because in Green Bay he didn't. Oh, no, he did. It was with Matt LaFleur. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Matt calls him, though. Matt calls him up there. You
Yep.
know, so so he's not going into a situation that he's like, feels, held back because he's not calling the plays. Like some of these guys are turning down jobs because they're not able to call it. Talking about the Jets, it sounded like that came out of the New York was, Wink wasn't going there because Wink wanted to call it. And Aaron said, and the owner said, "Hey, you're making a lot of money. You call the defense. Put that out there." So, that's why a lot of guys won't take jobs. If they want to call it, they're going to call it.
How interesting is it that the Giants they almost could have drafted Cam Ward, and now Brian Daboll gets to work with him in Tennessee, but he's the last guy that got anything out of Tua. It's a shame they can't bring him in. He was Tua's QB coach at Alabama in his freshman year. Daboll, but I'm just making a Tua joke there. The last guy who got anything out of Tua, they got to squeak, but Tua's done here anyway. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I love the hiring of Hackett. And Z, we talked about this on the show, being a first-time head coach, having a guy who's been a head coach on the staff as a confidant, as someone to talk to who's run the ship before, that's invaluable, right?
Oh, without a doubt, because he walked into a mess in Denver, had to try to clean it up, and it's kind of a mess here in Miami right now. So, Half can, go to him and say, "Hey, listen, how'd you do this over there in Denver when you first got there?" Or, just lean on him, because it's a taunting task to take that over. I always talk about Kyle Shanahan, when I was out in San Francisco. He leaned on his dad, I'm sure. Same as Kubiak could probably do in Vegas. He's going to lean on his dad because that's two, head coaches that have coached twice as a head coach. Actually, Mike 3 times, I believe, right? He was with the Raiders at one point, Denver, and then Washington. So, there's a lot of knowledge, you can bounce off somebody who's done it before, who's been in the foxhole as a head coach, had to deal with the front office, the ownership, the coaches, the players. That's a lot for, a first-time coach to handle, especially a young guy, so it's going to help out.
That's going to be an important pick, though, Kyle. I mean, to have a guy like Hackett who's been an elite coordinator, been a head coach, I mean, that's a huge, huge loss if you just turn around and lose him right away because quarterback is the biggest question mark on this team on top of everything else.
Yeah, and whether it's somebody who's a vet or if they go the draft route this year, right, that's a spot that you're going to want the time on task, and I think everybody acknowledges the risk that you might not hit it out of the park with the first swing of the bat, and John Eric Sullivan's talked about that as far as, we're prepared to take as many swings as we can, and even after we get a guy, we're going to keep adding economic quarterbacks from a cost perspective into the pool and constantly be addressing that spot. I think one thing that is interesting to watch here is when the Dolphins were first starting to do their interviews for offensive coordinator, they interviewed Gerard Johnson who's the quarterback's coach in Houston. And he had overlap with Bobby Slowick when Bobby was the offensive coordinator in Houston. Now he's currently Houston's quarterback's coach. So that's kind of why I went to, can you get a passing game coordinator title on top of quarterback's coach? Because they showed interest there. They interviewed him. He has a connection to Bobby Slowick. That's one that I kind of have soft circled to see, like, okay, they clearly had an interest here. Did the interview go well? And if it did, here's how they could go about still getting him on the staff. They would just need to give him that extra title and then hope that Houston would not elect to match if that's the guy that they felt like they wanted to bring in.
I think at this stage of the game, they're going to have to give whoever gets that spot a title.
Yeah.
Not just quarterback coach.
Because
it's so far down, everybody's, locked up or have jobs, and it's, they have a position job, but you have to give them a title now. So you have to pay them a little bit more money with that title, which is a good thing for, that coach. But to get a good, decent guy or the best guy available, you're going to have to give him that title.
Yeah.
Kyle, there's a question in the chat, and I don't have the answer, and I think you will. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm pretty sure you got this one. If Hackett leaves, do Dolphins get comp pick?
No. You only get compensation picks for coaching changes if the candidate who leaves is a minority candidate and they have 2 years or more on your staff, and it's only for head coaches or general managers. So there's none for any coordinator changes. It's only head coaches, general managers. Has to be a minority candidate with 2 or more years on your staff in the current role that they were in before they got hired elsewhere for that promotion.
That's why San Francisco didn't get any picks for Saleh this year.
Right.
If you'd waited one more year, they would have theoretically got 4 picks for the guy over, twice. But yeah.
Well, we talked about that this week with Anthony Weaver not getting a head job. The Dolphins were hoping maybe to get those 2/3, but instead, Coach Weave ends up in Baltimore. How about that? When the dust settles all season long, it was catastrophe with the Dolphins and the Dolphins. And, Mike McDaniel lands on his feet in LA with the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. Great position as the coordinator, albeit not as a head coach, taking a step down. But then Anthony Weaver gets the job in Baltimore, where he was drafted as a player, where he cut his teeth as a player, as a coach. I mean, you name it, he calls it his home, loves being there. So it's good to see him land on his feet and get a nice position in Baltimore and in a place that he loves so much. And so to see where the dust settles, Tyreek Hill may or may not play again. We don't even know. I mean, last time we saw him, he was on a cart. Nobody knows his whole game speed, what's it going to look like after the injury. And of course, with Tua, we talk about that all the time. But really, when you think about it, the dust settles and Mike McDaniel and Anthony Weaver end up in really good spots. Z, I mean, you don't wish misery on anybody. You wish them well when they go, right?
No, I mean, we went to a great spot. Like you said, it's like his first home in the NFL. They drafted him. He played there 4 years. He's coached there 3 years. He was assistant head coach there. He's got a lot of ties to that building, to that organization. Mm-hmm. So it's a great spot for him to go. I know he's not going to be calling the defense this year. Minter came out and said he's doing it, but he's still going to lead these men into Sunday every week. He's going to be, the face of it during the week. He's doing all the meetings. He's, setting everything up with the coaches and the players. And, Minter's going to be in the meetings, but not all of them. Where when he's not in there, then Weave's got to take it over. But on Sunday, he's just not going to call it. But he's going to have a lot of input, into the game plan, into the calls being called. And I think it's a good spot for him to, to get going again.
Yeah, and Harbaugh said he wanted a head coach for the offense, Kyle, and he got one.
What I like about
Jim, not John.
What I like about the Weaver fit first is to Z's point, I feel like this allows all of his best qualities to shine. Like the people that have the questions about Anthony Weaver will look at the raw defensive output and production, and there's some context as far as why that happened. But at the end of the day, your resume says what your resume says as far as what the defensive statistics are, right? So he gets to be that CEO's type for the defense without the play sheet on game days. And I think that's a really great position for him as he assimilates into a new situation to be the best version of himself as a coach with what I think his strengths and weaknesses are. I see like that Dan Campbell type of coach with the presence and the demeanor. And as we saw with Dan Campbell in Detroit this year, right? Like he's a head coach, but they lost those 2 coordinators for those 2 head coaching jobs elsewhere. And that Detroit team took a step back, right? But that's Dan's true strength is the leadership and the presence and the CEO style. And I see Anthony in a lot of the same ways as far as why I think he's eventually going to be a successful coach and a successful head coach. But I think this is a good next stop for him to further amplify and then be the coordinator of a defense if Minter delivers the way that they want him to as the head coach of the team. That bullet point on the resume might not be there in 2-3 years of, oh, he's the defensive coordinator in this Ravens team. We didn't have the same questions that we did with what the Dolphins defense produced like in 2025. As far as Harbaugh and McDaniel and that fit, I hope Harbaugh reins them in, because I think that was one of the big critiques that I had about Miami in the passing game down the stretch was there was so many wrinkles to it that it kind of lost some of its efficiency and simplicity to allow the players to play fast, right? When you consider the procedural stuff and the illegal shifts and guys lining up in the right spot and getting the personnel groups out there. Like, I think if you can harness Mike's creativity and allow him to be creative, but kind of keep him in between the lines on the highway a little bit, I think you can mitigate some of the things that Dolphins fans really grew frustrated with down the stretch as he was the unquestioned head coach here in Miami.
Z, you want to piggyback on that with Mike and Harbaugh before we go to break?
Oh, it's going to be interesting because, they're two, big personality guys. So it's going to be interesting how that all develops out there. They're both offensive minded, coaches, and, I'm sure, Harbaugh's going to have his, take on what he wants, and, Mike's going to have his take. And but I still think, in the end, they're going to get it going out there, because Mike is a good offensive coach, good offensive minded coach. And he'll try to prove everybody, that he's still a guru on offense in the end.
Get a little too fancy for his own good. I think that's what Kyle was saying too when he's talking about reining him in. And, it's hard to rein a guy like that in when people have been copying what he does. His pre-snap motions, especially, even Kyle Shanahan saying he took some of those from Mike McDaniel. And that's high praise coming from a guy like him, who right now people are saying is probably the best offensive mind in the game. Maybe him, maybe Andy Reid, who knows? I love John Gruden too. I don't think Gruden's ever getting another head coaching job, but he'll keep making good videos. It's Gries, it's Z, it's Kyle, it's the Dolphin Squad Show, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 podcast network in the world. Going to take a quick break, tell you about some offers from incredible sponsors of ours. Come on back and talk a little bit more about the coaching staff. A big wide receiver added by the Miami Dolphins, and a roll of the dice that, if it pays off, could be huge in that receivers room for whoever the quarterback is and whoever the QB coach is. We'll be right back with more of the Squad Show after these words. Stick around. All right, well, I get a chance to talk to you about TurboTax. It's that time of year, is it not? Tax season, but it doesn't have to take over your life. Because this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online if that's your thing. They handle everything, W-2s, self-employment forms, all the way down to get you every deduction and the most money back, after all, right? Or the cheapest tax bill, whatever that ends up being. Hopefully for you, a refund. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in your TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it for you. And for a limited time right now, hey, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150. All in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today with TurboTax on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And next up, tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Single, if you're not in a relationship, sometimes if you are, maybe that'd be a reason. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, the pressure, the stress, so much talk about relationships. It can honestly feel like everyone else has it all together in their love life. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring it out, and we never stop. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off of yourself this time of year or any time of year. It's easy to assume everyone else has the perfect relationship, right? But most people are working through something. Let's be real. Therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down. It can help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. That's a big one for me. And even if you're not in a relationship right now, therapy can help you feel more confident in what you want moving forward. Biggest thing, it reminds you that you're not behind. You are right on time. And right now, BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the U.S. They do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time. Sign up, get 10% off betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BETTERHELP.com. BetterHelp.com/lockedon for BetterHelp on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Blew it. There we go. Ha! It's kind of fun. So what we were just doing there, like rotating the guys back and forth, it's like the musical chairs coaching carousel in the NFL right now. I mean, you don't want to be the last guy standing with no chair left, man. And it's kind of feeling like that with guys being plugged in everywhere, Z. And it's just a crazy time of year. The phones are ringing off the hook. Guys are moving all over the place. Head coaches are being bumped down to coordinators after being fired. Coordinators are being elevated. Dreams are coming true. Dreams are being shattered. Careers are coming to an end. And it's just a crazy time of year in the NFL. And we have the Super Bowl this week.
Yeah, but it's a great time of year. I mean, that's what you live for. I mean, that's just part of the business, it's part of the lore of the game. You know, the ups and downs, the crashes and the failures, and then the victories.
Well, the music hasn't stopped yet, and things are still happening, and obviously a couple of teams are playing this week. I feel like you're doomed if you reach the championship game and lose, the conference championship game and lose, because it seems to me like that's where the most assistants get plucked from during the time between the Super Bowl. And the Rams, Z, in particular, McVay just gets picked clean ruthlessly and relentlessly all the time.
Yeah, he loses a lot of coordinators year in year, but they're picking, really good coaches on his staff. That's why they're in that game every year almost. That's just a testament to, him knowing good football and good football coaches.
And you look at the LaFleur brothers, Kyle, and that's nice. I mean, it's not just the Harbaugh brothers, right? It's the LaFleur brothers now too, and the newest one coming in and getting that head job. It's crazy with McVay losing guys like he does, and it just goes to show you a big part of the talent of being a great coach, Kyle, is how you coach your coaches. I've seen some documentaries on that with guys like Don Shula and guys like Bill Walsh, and how they would actually coach their coaches while they're coaching their players. And I mean, that's pretty evident with McVay.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Miami is probably trying to emulate a little bit, where you got a lot of guys that are coming in as assistant coaches who have more college experience than pro experience, or they're still young coaches, right? And they're trying to cultivate that culture and that pipeline of not just players, but also coaches, that if in a couple of years Bobby Slowick does get poached for a head coaching job because he knocks it out of the park, hypothetically, you have somebody on staff that could step in. And I think the nice thing about the coaching tree that Hafley shares some branches with, and you just saw it in San Francisco when Robert Saleh left, is Raheem Morris, who was a defensive coordinator for another one of the Shanahan disciples, now comes over and he's a defensive coordinator in San Francisco. And kind of that pipeline with Mike LaFleur and Matt LaFleur in Green Bay to Arizona, and potentially Nathaniel Hackett if he's not going to go to Miami, because there's a LaFleur Hafley pipeline, right? Like that interwoven connection of this family of coaches that all kind of have spread across the league as deep as they have. I think if you have some in continuity, you hope that you have a pipeline of coaches ready to roll. But if you don't, you can be a little bit more opportunistic, especially if you're one of the established teams like San Francisco is, where, Saleh got let go. Well, we'll bring Robert Saleh in, and he's going to be the defense coordinator. Saleh got a head coaching job. Okay, we'll just go get Raheem Morris, right? Like he's got connections with this guy that I'm buddies with that's a head coach elsewhere, and it was a DC for him. So I think Miami's still in the game with some of that, but I do think you look at the pipeline and not just coaching the players, but coaching the coaches like you talked about. I think that's something that you maybe see them aspiring to build as a part of this culture and this build that they're on right now based off some of their picks as the coaches.
Yeah, and Z, it's not just the musical chairs, whether you get a coaching job or not, who ends up on the Browns or the Cardinals. We'll get into that mess in a minute, Z. But what does it mean to you when I use the phrase a head coach coaching the coaches on the staff as well? I mean, that's invaluable especially for a young coach, right?
Oh, without a doubt, because again, when you start jumping around from team to team, every head coach is different. You try to like Kyle just said, if you keep somebody in a tree, you kind of know and expect what the head coach wants from you, because you've had it before with a different head coach, but the same tree. So you got to kind of feel for it. It's just like when Belichick was losing coaches and, getting head jobs, and they're still bringing all their guys in because they want somebody to do it the Patriot way back then when they were calling it that, and try to keep it the same so you don't have to worry about it. So, a head coach has got to explain to, the assistants what he wants, and coaches you, and it gives you tidbits, how to improve what you're doing, what, suggestions and all that. And it just helps you become a better coach.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, one thing we know for sure, guys, and Kyle wrote about this too on A to Z, as Troy Aikman can help him find a new QB coach. I mean, high praise for Troy coming from all angles, seriously. For his role and what the Dolphins have been doing. And it makes me wonder, with so many people retiring to Florida all the time, Kyle, maybe there's a president of football operations for Troy Aikman in the future with the Miami Dolphins, as they really relied heavily on his advice, being, like you've talked about on the show, being a great commentator and traveling around the league for 25 years and having his finger on the pulse of the league and looking at guys like DeMeco Ryans before he was a head coach and being able to say, hey, he's going to be a great head coach, and felt the same way about Jeff Hafley. So incredibly high praise this week coming from Troy Aikman with regard to Jeff Hafley. And apparently Troy's really liked him for a long time and figured he would be a good head coach in the NFL one day a long time ago.
Yeah, it was that was interesting to hear from Troy. He was on the Rich Eisen show, and he talked about some of the production meetings that he's done with guys that he's never met before and the impression that they immediately make on him. And he put Hafley in the same bucket as Mike Vrabel and DeMeco Ryans, which is really good company to put Jeff Hafley into. As far as the first time I met him, I knew he was going to be a head coach soon before long. And those guys obviously have successful resumes that speak for themselves. Vrabel's win percentage is 58%, and DeMeco's is like 63.5% as head coaches in the NFL. So here's hoping that Troy's right in that regard. And what was interesting about those comments is remembering that Troy was not originally tabbed to do a head coaching search, right? He was tabbed to do the GM search.
Yep.
And he still had that knowledge and that memory of Hafley from 2024, the first time he met him during a pre-production meeting, that had that strong impression. So the fact that they make the GM decision that they do through the process that they laid with Troy and some of that groundwork, and then asked him to stay on for the head coaching interviews, I think that only further strengthened the tie that we ultimately ended up getting for Hafley to end up being the pick. And as a quick side note, I don't know if anybody knew this, we are getting press conferences today with Jeff Hafley speaking as we speak. So I think they're doing coordinator introduction stuff. So there'll be some good content to come out the other side and see what kind of get talks about in the press conference.
Yeah, that's fun. We can react in real time right here on the show. It's exciting. It's fun times. Everything's new. And obviously the Niners get rated every year. The Rams we talked about. The Seahawks right now with Kubiak all but done with the Raiders, and the game coming up this week, which we'll talk about later in the show. But the mess, let's talk real quick toward the end of the segment around the league. First of all, the Jets, man, little fear struck in the hearts of Jets rivals in the AFC East. You think about that offensive coordinator hire, a big get for Aaron Glenn in year 2, Frank Reich, Z, the offensive coordinator for the Jets, Jets.
No, that's a big hire for him. Frank, ex-teammate from the Carolina Panthers, 1995. So yeah, I mean he's a good offensive-minded coach. He's done some good things as a coordinator throughout the years when he was coordinating and head coaching and whatever. I think it's a good pick for Aaron to get try to get that side of the ball kind of more stabilized and scoring some points.
Yeah, they need help on that side in a big way, Kyle.
Yeah, and Frank Reich is another one of those guys, kind of not dissimilar to what we talked about with Nathaniel Hackett, right? Like everybody remembers Frank Reich for the end in Indianapolis, and then the following year being one and done with a 1-10 start with Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. But there's a pretty strong body of work in his first year in Indianapolis and then his last year in Philadelphia as an offensive coordinator. I mean, that was top 6 offense in most statistical categories, right? In 17 and 18. So, and he was top 10 in yards in 2015 with the Chargers as well. So, the rushing offenses there with the Chargers were not good, but the passing offenses were top 10 in yards both seasons with the Chargers. So there's pretty good track record of guys that he's worked with, pretty good proof of concept. And for Aaron Glenn, he's tapping a former teammate of his too. I think they were teammates on the 96 Jets.
Yeah.
When, Frank started a few games and Glenn was like a full-time starter. I think as a rookie was the year that's
they when Dan got him. Together. That's when Dan got him with the fake spike.
So those ties, we have talked several times about the ties and the family of coaches, and it never really goes away. And for a team like New York, with how unstable it's been, having a relationship to tie in to get a guy who has the kind of proof of concept that Frank has, I think is a big win for them, because they needed somebody in a bad way.
Guys, the chat's good today. Someone wrote Phillip Rivers, QB coach. Why not? He's been linked to everything else this year on the comeback trail.
Yeah.
He got to have to prime away from. I was just down in his neck of the woods. A couple years ago, I drove past his house when I was down there for the Senior Bowl. So he's got a good little setup out there. And I know South Florida's got a good appeal, but he's still got his starting 11 down there with the kids. So
exactly.
It'd be a hard pull, I think, to pull him away at this stage. Maybe a couple years, he might be a little more receptive.
He is in the woods too.
Yes,
the deep woods.
Yep, the backwoods.
Real quick before we go to break, we're running a little long, but I want to get your guys' thoughts before we wrap the segment, because we'll turn the corner on the other side. The shit show in Cleveland, excuse my language, but there's no other way to say it. I mean, their uniforms are brown for a reason, Z. Ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's it's a saga, but that's the Cleveland way, I think. So, between the quarterback situation and now the defensive coordinator, head coach situation, I feel for some of the guys on that staff. I feel for some of those players, because it's never ending up there. Yeah. And it's driven by ownership, it seems like. And hopefully one day they can clean it all up, and hopefully soon. Hopefully they can figure out, what they're going to do with the DC position, and just move forward and get the offseason going and get everything rolling and trying to pull them back to what they once were.
Yeah, Kyle, Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, things not going so well there. And, big shocker, their mum on who the QB1's going to be going into the OTAs in the camps.
Yeah, well, and Z talked about ownership there in Cleveland, and apparently with this hire with Monken, he went against the advice of the search committee and his GM for who he picked for the head coach. So it's like, what was the conversation like with Jim Schwartz after 35-year-old Nate Shieldhouse, who has 2 years of coaching experience in the NFL, did his second in-person interview? Like, what created that expectation for Jim Schwartz? And we may never know, right? But that's what I want to know is, why did Jim Schwartz have such a strong belief that he was going to be the head coach of the team, just to find out that he's getting passed over for, and Todd's a successful NFL coach, but it's not like there's a long-term play relative to a really young coach versus an older coach. Todd's going to turn 60. I think he might be today or tomorrow. Todd turned 60 years old, right? He's a first-time head coach. So it's how not to go about a process to kind of have this long drawn-out thing, and have these very unique interviewing. Like, they make their coach interviews do essays about this, that, and the other thing with the team, and they're very analytically driven with their decision-making process. And they get down to Jim Schwartz, and whatever was said, and then they go in a different direction, and now they're potentially going to lose Jim Schwartz. So how not to go about a head coaching search by the Cleveland Browns, the 2026 version.
Yeah, and ironically, as you're saying all those things, Kyle, I think about the way the Dolphins went about it, and to me, what a difference. The Dolphins were really impressive with the way they went about not just the coaching search and hire, but the GM search and hire as well. And the results will speak for themselves, we know, no matter what. But, at least so far, so good for Miami, not becoming one of those organizations. I mean, I haven't won in a long time, haven't had real success in a long time, but hey, we're not the Cardinals and we're not the Browns. no matter what, we can say that. And
Hang
we
the
are
banner.
on the rebound. And we're not the Jets either, although they did get Frank Reich. It's your Dolphin Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 podcast network in the world. Kyle's going to tell you about Home Chef. We're right back to see if we can get any reactions from the press conference that's happening today with Jeff Hafley, more than likely introducing the coordinators, offense and defense, Bobby Slowick and Sean Duggan. We'll do that. We'll pick the Super Bowl. Oh, the disrespect for the New England Patriots. The Seahawks might be in trouble. We'll be right back in a minute. Keep it here.
As the new year gets going, a lot of people want to try to simplify their routines. Dinner can be a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan can make all the difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, either 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches with over 30 weekly options, including family-size meals and different dietary choices. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. But you must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert.
There we go. There's that musical chairs for the coaching search. That's all for them here on the show. And we're going to try to react to this press conference if we can while we're still here on the show. And we're going to pick the Super Bowl. But before we do, I just have to laugh. I do. I don't know if I want to laugh because I'll probably cry later. Z, the disrespect for the New England Patriots. This is absurd. Robert Kraft isn't going to make the Hall of Fame on the first ballot either. People had their theories. He's keeping Belichick out. So you have a 6-time Super Bowl champion owner, a 6-time Super Bowl champion head coach. Neither of them get in on the first ballot. In the same year they go to the Super Bowl, I cannot even imagine what Vrabel's pregame speech is going to be like and the fire that team is going to come out with on Sunday. A little extra on top of everything else being Super Bowl Sunday.
They're waiting for Brady. They're all three going in together, Gries. Mark my words.
Why would they do that?
Why not? Make it a whole Patriot thing.
Oh, man, I don't know. I think it's crazy, though. I mean, how does neither one of them get in? I would think that if one of them weren't going to get in, gun to my head, life on the line, I would have definitely said Kraft won't get in right away. Belichick will. Gun to my head, 99.9, all my kids with guns to their head, is Belichick getting in or not right away? Gries, yes. But man, it seems crazy. It does seem like, Kyle, there's a message being sent like, don't mess with the master, Roger Goodell. And the Patriots have found that out. And he's going to say that NFL doesn't have anything to do with the Hall of Fame and blah, 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 BS.
I don't know if you guys knew this, but Don Shula was a first ballot Hall of Fame head coach. Mm-hmm. He's the only man with more wins than Bill Belichick. So yep. I'd like to present my case for the greatest of all time to lie in the winningest coach in NFL history, who also happens to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's my only feedback on this conversation is Don Shula would never not make the Hall of Fame in his first time eligible to be elected. Never. It's crazy. And if Brady, now all the speculation is that Brady's not going to make it first ballot, which would be insane too, because, but everybody deflates footballs and everybody videotaped other teams' practices. Other Hall of Fame coaches from Jimmy Johnson right on down have come out and said it. Z, we all did it. We all did everything he did. And, they're punishing Bill for some reason. Well, I guess I'm not a voter, so I'm still waiting for my vote to get in. So, I'll wait here until, maybe the three of them and I go in together. Imagine that, Z, you're in the Locked On Dolphins Hall of Fame. Oh, gee, thanks. Yeah, the pantheon of greats. This is three heads of the Mount Rushmore right here. And Kyle, Gries is the whole mount. I know, right? And Kyle's got the hair thing going. Every show, people are going, Kyle comes with the great info and the hair energy every show. So I try to get it to, but I've been seeing like rosemary oil, things like that. Maybe it could make a comeback. I don't know. We'll give it a shot. But the whole Patriot thing,
they always bring up, some of the indiscretions that everybody's had. That's why they're not getting in between the head coach and the owner. They've had their little blurps on and off the field, and that's something that it's got nothing to do with what they did, on the field, and that's where the vote should come from. I'm just saying that it's my opinion. Maybe I don't know facts behind that, but you read about it online and everything about, oh well, he deflate gate and videotape, and and the owner had his little issue at Super Bowl week that one time, and that it's got nothing to do with what they did on the field, and that's why they should have both been in on the first ballot. Yes, they should have been in.
Well, they're very clearly telling Bill, the voters are, Kyle, that you don't belong in the pantheon. And you talked about Don Shula, and Kyle, I appreciate you. You're always making me get better and do more research and look up the very few head coaches, surprisingly low number of head coaches who have been first ballot Hall of Famers. First of all, when you talk about the greatest coach of all time, you talk about Shula, you talk about Belichick. There's one other name you talk about. Who is it, guys?
Bill Walsh, Lombardi.
Guess who else wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer? Bill Walsh. Guess who else wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer? Vince Lombardi. Stunningly. So Don Shula, Chuck Noll, Tom Landry, George Halas, and Curly Lambeau, and that's it.
There you go.
I thought the list would be longer than that. I'm stunned, actually.
Can I go ahead and plant my flag in the ground and say that Tom Brady will be first ballot Hall of Famer, and they won't play these games with Tom Brady in 2028?
They will not.
90,000 career passing yards and 649 passing touchdowns. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I think he has more passing touchdowns, and it's another 88 passing touchdowns in the postseason too. But I think he has more than Dan and Troy do combined for passing touchdowns for their careers. As Dan was 420, and I know Troy didn't have a super high amount. So it was funny going through the selection process for the coaches. It's the Dolphins have on their council, they've got Troy Aikman and Dan Marino might be the most touchdown passes ever on a panel to decide a head coach, but that's not true because Tom Brady has more than both of those guys combined. I mean, Troy Aikman has 165. So he does have more than Dan Marino and Troy Aikman do combined.
That's unbelievable. I love that, Kyle. Great info. But I think about Marino in today's game, Z, or Aikman in today's game, and I really don't think it's a fair comparison. I love Pat Mahomes, and I love Tom Brady for that matter. In fact, one of the best days for me as a father, 2007, I took my 5-year-old son, Jake, at the time, to see the 07 Patriots put 49 on the Dolphins. And it was one of the best. I still have the picture. I might hang it behind me with the Marino pictures for the next show. But it just was crazy to see that kind of greatness in person, Z. Was unbelievable, man. We were up in the upper level, too. It didn't even matter. Randy Moss had a couple touchdowns. That team, I don't care what anybody says, that's the best team of all time. I still can't believe they lost to the damn Giants in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they were undefeated, right?
Yeah.
And Junior Seau would have got a Super Bowl ring.
Yep.
So,
yeah. You're right. Good point.
But that's why you love the game. You don't know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen this coming Sunday between these two good teams that are playing. Everyone's bashing it's not going to be a good Super Bowl. I think it's going to be a great Super Bowl. And I played against all three of those guys we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And I played against Marino, I played against Aikman, and I played against, Brady. The game's a little bit different now with, especially with, Dan and Troy, because there was a little bit more running involved back in those days. They weren't just lighting up like they are nowadays.
A lot more hitting too.
Yeah. So, you had receivers, getting a little gator arm across the middle. Now it's like flag football in the secondary, with all the crossing routes. You didn't see a lot of crossing routes, especially if you went against Denver with Atwater, or Tampa with Lynch,
Ronnie Lott,
Ronnie Lott, or Washington with the Hurricane, Sean Taylor. Yeah. You had an enforcer out there.
Louis Oliver, Jake Scott.
Yeah, so it's a little different nowadays. Troy had Emmitt Smith, who was always going for 100 yards. And when we, even Kurt Warner in St. Louis. We had Marshall's going for 100 and 100 receiving, which helped out Kurt's numbers too. It was a little bit more running game compared to what it is nowadays.
That's one of the best parts of Kurt Warner's story. Not only does he go bag groceries and play in the Arena League and do the impossible and make the league, he gets the keys to maybe the greatest supercar ever built for an NFL offense. I mean, you think about, Marshall Faulk and Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce, and good Lord, Z, you got Orlando Pace on your backside. Hello, kid. Here you go.
Oh, no. I mean, he walked into a great situation for being a first-time starter. I mean, we had legit 5 receivers. We had two good tight ends, Ernie Conwell and Roland Williams. We had Marshall in the backfield. We had James Hodges.
Jeff Zgonina at tackle, defensive tackle.
Oh, no, I don't know about that.
You were 4th on the team in sacks that year. I just looked it up.
I know.
I know.
I know.
How many?
Yeah, I mean, and defensively, I believe that year we were in the top 5. I think at the end of the year, that first Super Bowl
4th in scoring defense. That year.
Leonard Little.
We had Leonard Little, a young Leonard Little, just finally putting his hand in the dirt. No, actually, I don't think if Leonard was there in that first Super Bowl. I mean, he was on the
Kevin Carter,
Grant Wistrom, DeMarco Farr was Pro Bowl year that year. Ray Agnew, who's now the assistant GM up in Detroit. So we had Mike Jones, the savior. Yeah.
Who?
The greatest tackle in NFL history.
Yeah. Todd Light, a young Dre Bly. We had Dexter McLeon. And we had a lot of cats. Keith Lyle.
Dre Bly was good.
Yeah, that was his rookie year. Him and Torrey's rookie year. They were first pick, second pick of the draft that year.
And it's crazy when we talk about the Patriots being a team that beat that Rams team, and they've won some of the greatest Super Bowls in history. They've lost a couple of the greatest in history. Man, I don't know. Kyle, do we have anything from the press conference yet? Should we just do our Super Bowl picks now and wrap up with?
I'd say throw it a break and maybe we can. There's a couple tweets that have been put out, but it's like they're not live streaming it, so we're kind of at the mercy of what drops out. So I could pick out a quote if you want to go to break. We could do a quote on the other side of the break and then do our Super Bowl picks.
All right, there we go. That's Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins. That's Jeff Zgonina, former Miami Dolphin. And how many teams, Z? 27 years, 14 teams? 13, 14.
26 teams.
I didn't get it backwards this time. I
don't even know anymore, Gries. It's like, just so many.
It'll be 28 here in the near future, Z. As much as we hate to lose you, let's hope that you find the perfect chair when the music stops. This is your Dolphin Squad Show. We're live on YouTube. Then we upload, you download Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course Roku as well. And I was looking it up, guys. People watch our show all over the country, so I want to say hello to every one of you who's watching us through one of our TV affiliates. Through Tegna. We have stations all over the country: Florida, Texas, Iowa, who show the Dolphin Squad Show and Locked On Dolphins content. So we appreciate all you guys, all you Dolphins all over the country and all over the world. One more segment to go, quick spot, and we wrap it up. Stick around. All right, get those guys out of there so I can tell you about Gusto. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. Blech. That's where Gusto comes in, to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one, remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or the hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. You get that with Gusto. Gusto's animated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits save me hours every week. And knowing you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you the real peace of mind that you can only get with Gusto. So try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months free payroll at Gusto, Gusto, gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time, gusto.com/LockedOnNFL for Gusto on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There we go. Gries, Kyle, and Z wrapping it up on the Squad Show. Kyle, have you been able to pick anything from that press conference yet?
Yeah, I got one from the fourth head on the Locked On Dolphins Mount Rushmore. It's Travis Wingfield, who's now the in-house media guy for the team, and he had this hosting job for this show before I did. So he's at the presser and he's put out a few quotes. And one that I figured we'd read a little bit is from Bobby Slowick, asking about how much the offense will look like Mike McDaniels. And he said, the bones are the same, the roots are the same, but all trees grow different. A lot of that has to do with the players you have on your team, which changes so much from year to year. Says offensive balance is one of his core staples. They will be predicated in the run game, and a big point of emphasis in that element of the offense.
There you go. What are your thoughts, Z, on that?
No, it's the truth. It's always evolving from year after year. It always changes. You always got to adapt to what you have on roster, and Bobby's going to do a good job of that. And it's going to you're going to see some of the same kind of concepts, but it's going to be Bobby's deal. It's not going to be Mike's deal.
And Kyle, real quick, now we're going to give our Super Bowl pick, and we're going to be reacting to the press conference as well. But more Dolphins news, a weapon potentially for Bobby Slowick in the receivers room, as Terrace Marshall Jr., former LSU star, and once a real big prospect and a guy with a huge upside and could really potentially be a big signing for Miami. They bring him into that wide receiver room. We talked about Tyreek Hill, and I've been reading that he may possibly be a pre-June 1st cut, where everything I had read before is that it'd be post-June 1st. But with the cap booming up to over $300 million now, if you cut Tyreek before June 1st, you save more money?
Yeah. So you'd save the same amount of money. You're going to save $23 million if you cut him pre-June 1st. If you cut him post-June 1st, you don't get any savings until June 2nd. The Dolphins need that $23 million to get compliant and then have money to add. They're not going to be big spenders in free agency, but the work you would have to do with names like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Bradley Chubb and potentially restructuring Tua's contract and cutting names like Jason Sanders and Alec Ingold, all to get the same amount of pre-June 1st savings that you need, because you're like $20 million over the cap right now, that you could just get from just taking it all and moving on from Tyreek Hill. Just take the cap savings from moving on from Tyreek Hill. This is going to be a big salary cap dump year anyway. There's not really a lot of motivation to get more savings and put more dead cap into 2027. Just take it this year and get the savings up front and get salary cap compliant for moving one player, which you can do with Tyreek Hill. So that's how I expect this to play out in that regard. I mean, there's no other contract move short of restructuring Tua's contract to defer more of that into the future that the Dolphins can do to have more cap savings than cutting Tyreek Hill post June 1st, and cutting Tyreek Hill pre-June 1st is the third biggest thing that they can do behind those other two things. So take that cap savings up on the front, take the dead cap all in this year, and that way you're not taking $40 million in dead cap in 2027. So you can get compliant and clear your 27 books all in one fell swoop.
And you look at the legacy of Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins, clearly one of the greatest receivers in the history of the organization. Z, the numbers prove that. He was a big part of the offense that got Dolphin fans so excited, hanging 70 on Denver and the future looking so bright. But, from the moment he got arrested on opening day before the Jacksonville game, although he did score the winning touchdown that day, it was all downhill after that. I just want to get your thoughts on the if he indeed is going to be gone, and we have to assume he is, the Dolphins' tenure during the career of Tyreek Hill.
I mean, he did some great things on the field. He came in to fill a spot, for Mike, in his offensive scheme, and he did that well while he was healthy and on the field. But now, he's been hurt, and he's a big cap, issue for us. And I think Bobby and Half want to go in a different direction. No matter what, in about 2 to 3 years, this roster is going to look completely different. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to happen in the first year or even the second year, but by year third year and fourth year, it's going to look completely different. But that's just what happens when a new coach comes in. And that's what happens now with free agency and just the way the system works. So every year it's different, guys at 53 in that room battling, week in and week out. So it's going to look different. So thank you for what you did. Thank you for your service. And it's time to move on.
Kyle?
Better late than never. The moment Tyreek Hill pulled himself out of the game at halftime in week 18 last year, that was it for me. I said, okay, and you kind of knew with Tyreek, the off the field stuff has been very well established with him for a very long time. There's no questioning or doubting the physical talent that he is and how good of a football player he is. But with everything that came to a head this past off season, and for that to be such a public and visible part of it, unfortunately, they tripled down on his contract before the 24 season and gave him 25, his 25 salary guaranteed when they didn't really have to. He had multiple years left on his deal. He had guarantee money that was left over. They gave him a raise. They gave him more guarantees, and it made it really difficult to move on from last year. And had you had the chance to do that, well, maybe you invest something that you get back from Tyreek Hill to have another receiver that would be in the room that you would feel like could give some of the speed elements to help space the field that you were missing when he was out this year. But I think it's a shame that Tyreek Hill's tenure in Miami, as good as it was on the field from a production standpoint, and those first 2 seasons were as electric as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that he well earned that title of the number 1 player in the NFL after that 2023 season with how good he was those first 2 years. But I do think it's a shame when I reflect on the entirety of that team that he was a central piece of. Some of that's soured for me, and maybe it lessens with time, but that whole saga with the Jets and then the apology tour during Super Bowl week and taking it all back, and then he's going on live streams and saying this, that, the other thing, and all the legal stuff that he's been tied up with. It's a mixed bag, but I would have hoped this time last year, I was hoping that Tyreek Hill was not going to be in the roster in 2025 because of how things ended in 2024.
And it didn't end well for Tyreek in Miami, and we'll see if he has anything left after the injury. Maybe he ends up with Mike McDaniel in LA with the Chargers and Justin Herbert, maybe back in Kansas City. Who knows for Tyreek Hill? And obviously you'll hear it here first on the channel with Kyle and with us here on the Squad Show when something does happen. Anything else from that presser yet, Kyle? You know, one thing for sure, Jalen Waddle's going to be the guy at wide receiver 1, right? And some news came out this week. I don't know if you guys saw it from the Bills camp, talking about how they didn't think the Dolphins were ever really serious about trading them Jalen Waddle, and that they maybe were just trying to use them to drive up the price and get someone else to bite. I don't know if you guys saw that. I found that to be interesting.
Yeah, I saw Brandon Beane's. I mean, Brandon Beane kind of went out there after they had the trade deadline that passed with his tail tucked between his legs about how these guys are asking for Madden prices for players and this and that. And it's, you know, you should expect to get hit with the premium surcharge if you're the Bills and you've won 13 out of 15 times the last 2 teams have played each other. And you're talking about trading one of your best players in division in the prime of his career while he's got 3 really attractive years of contract left.
Right.
You're darn right. I'm asking you for an arm, a leg, a kidney, an eyeball, an eardrum, and 3 toes. Like, yeah, I would too. Like, I don't blame the Dolphins for doing that.
No, I find that to be funny. And I wanted to get your thoughts too, guys. And before we wrap it up on this, at least we'll pick our Super Bowl winners as well. But Terrace Marshall Jr., you know, the thoughts are that maybe they take a flyer on this guy. I mean, he was great at LSU, drafted by the Panthers, was pretty good in Carolina. You know, Vegas, not much there, caught 3 balls. And then last year on the Eagles practice squad, do you see anything there, Kyle, with him that, I mean, they took a shot on him. Maybe they catch lightning in a bottle somehow, some way, and he can help them a little bit. He's big, strong.
Yeah, it's 6'2.5", 205, ran a 4.4 flat at his pro day. Was the third wheel in that 2019 LSU offense with Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, right? Yep. I think he got 13 touchdowns that season, which, hey, 13 touchdowns on like 40 something catches with Chase and Jefferson as your 2 running mates in the wide receiver room. Turns out you don't
play tight end.
You don't have that kind of supporting cast around you when you hit the NFL. You know, you don't get 2 all-time greats at wide receiver playing in front of you in the depth chart, and he's found that out the hard way. It's a scratch-off ticket, right? And I think that's where, you know, you're going to want competition. You're going to want guys that maybe have a good pedigree physically, but have been able to put it together, that you can get for minimum salary with all the competition that you want to try to breed, and get guys that are hungry, right? And I liken it to what Greg Dulcich was this past year as a guy who was a top 100 pick, very clearly had physical tools. There were circumstances that prevented it from working out in his other places, and he took the bull by the horns. And I think he's earned himself another chance to be here if they're willing to have him back and they're willing to work on a new contract with him. So you maybe get 10 of those on an offseason roster out of a 90-man roster. Maybe 2 of them hit. Probably one of them hits, but maybe 2. Like, I think it's the first of what I would expect to be several guys with this kind of pedigree added to the roster.
And the Dolphins have had success in the past in the receiver room with unknowns stepping up and becoming huge parts of the game plan. And the big receiver, Dan Marino, loved Oronde Gadsden, Z. So, you think of the body and the frame and the size for Marshall, and that would be, if he could fill those shoes even close to what the Big O did, they'd be all right with this move.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what they're thinking. And you're taking a flyer on a guy. He's not costing you anything against the cap, because it's this time of year. It's not like there's a demand for him, obviously, so they give him a veteran minimum contract probably, and, see how the spring goes through. And if he's worth bringing to camp, they bring him to camp. If not, they can cut him loose and have no hit on the cap.
We have anything else from the press conference, Kyle, before we give our picks?
No, let's go Super Bowl picks.
Let's go Super Bowl picks. Well, ESPN had 58 of their experts pick the Super Bowl winner, right? And these are their experts. These are their people, their top people. 48 of them picked the Seahawks, guys. 48 of the 58. Everybody's picking Seattle, disrespecting the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick doesn't get in the Hall of Fame. Robert Kraft doesn't get in the Hall of Fame. It's announced at Super Bowl week. Oh, they disrespected the Patriots. They poked the bear. Now they're going to bring in Brady for the pregame speech. The bandwagon's going to roar full speed out to the West Coast. And I actually think now that Brady's going to give the pregame speech. They disrespect the greatest organization in the history. They're going to come out with extra fire, extra intensity to win it for Robert Kraft. And man, I actually think it will matter. Everybody goes, oh, it's the Super Bowl. It shouldn't matter. It does matter, I believe. And I think in one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history, they've done it before. Sorry, Z. The New England Patriots will shock the world once more. And they hold the Seahawks. Not only do they beat them, they hold them under 20 points. Sam Darnold has a terrible game. He's picked off a million times. 21-17 Patriots beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, Z.
I'm going Seattle. Not just because you took New England. I just think Seattle is on a roll right now. I think Sam's playing some really good football, and that defense is special. They're playing fast. They're playing physical. And I think they're going to get after May because they had a hard time protecting him throughout the year, especially in the playoffs. He's been hit a lot. And and that defense is going. So I'm thinking Seattle.
And he's got a little bit of a shoulder thing too, Drake May, that I've been reading about this week, Kyle. But real quick, Z, before I let you go on that one, picking Seattle, I know you love Kubiak and the job he's done this year, and that offense is on fire right now. So that's a big part of things there.
Yeah, and plus they have D-Law on defense. I coached him in Dallas, so I always like to root for, my players and my friends. I know Vrabel's a friend of mine, but I'm still going Seahawks.
All right, Kyle.
You can throw me on the hater bandwagon here. I'm going with the Seahawks as well. I expect the under on points. Or this is 45.5. I think the thing I feel best about here is the under.
Yeah.
Where I agree. I don't think Sam Darnold's going to come in and light the world on fire. The Patriots run defense in the playoffs, 87, 48, and 79 yards allowed. They've been able to get a lot of turnovers. They've got 8 turnovers in 3 games since the wild card round. But their offense, they're under 250 yards offense. New England is in each of the last 2 weeks, and Seattle is not the team that you want to come in and prep for this game with 2 weeks of scouting ahead of time to get ready to roll and match you guys up, where they have just been a load. You take out the games against the Rams. All right, we're going to do the thing. They played the Rams in the conference championship and gave up 479 yards of offense. Yeah. They played the Rams in week 16 and gave up 581 yards of offense. Here are the yardage totals allowed in every game since Halloween that the Seahawks have given up aside of the Rams games, the 2 Rams games. 236, 173, 139, 220, 274, 162, 296, 149, 290, 254. Nobody's getting 300 yards against this team unless it's Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay.
And Puka.
So I think New England's offensive struggles, I think Seattle is going to be well attuned to coming into this game. I think they're the best unit on the field. I think they will neutralize any turnover issues that Seattle has. I think they'll make enough splash plays to win the game, but I expect a low-scoring contest.
I'm going Stephon Diggs MVP. What about you guys?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'll go Nick Emanwari, the rookie safety, big-time chess piece weapon for Mike McDonald. I'll go him.
What are the odds, man? Bet that somewhere, Kyle.
I think he's a big time chess piece, and I think
On
2 weeks for
FanDuel,
McDonald to get him rolling, I think they'll put him in position to make some big splash plays.
That would have to be. Could someone look that up? That would have to be gazillions.
I would assume so. Yeah.
And by the way, Kyle, I've been dying to ask you all day. Who was number 17 on Alabama? The helmet on your wall.
It's Jalen Waddle.
Ah, that's Waddle's helmet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure. Man, that's right. Alabama Crimson Tide helmet in the background. That was fun watching that. But guys, what a great show. This has been a fun show today. I mean, this coaching carousel stuff is a lot of fun. Kyle, you're killing it. I've been reading all your stuff on A to Z. Of course, Locked On Dolphins day in and day out with all the content. What do you have coming up for our people here in the near future after the show today?
Well, I looked up. It's February 4th, which means we're about a week away from the start of or a month away from the start of the league calendar year. And free agency is going to get on top of us in a hurry here. So there's going to be a lot of kind of free agency primers, looking at guys that are set to hit the market. Every year I do a simulated offseason. Last year I completely bombed the player values because teams spent like gangbusters on all their free agent contracts. So we'll be setting budgets on like looking to spend this much on this kind of player. Here's some options. We'll see who falls in that price range when it's all said and done. But I think teams generally this year in free agency are going to have more money than they know what to do with some of these teams and the way the cap's going up and the cap space that they have versus just who's going to be out there to hit the open market. So it's going to be a tough year to project that, but I do that every year. It's called the offseason blueprint, and it's cap management, external free agency, internal free agency, contract extension proposals for players on the roster, a mock draft, a 53-man roster projection at the end of the summertime, and then it's like a 3-year cap snapshot as far as like what the cap looks like. So that's my big labor of love in the offseason. We're going to get ready to start working on that in the next week or so.
305.2, that cap number has gone up a lot, man. That's exciting. Z, anything else you want to throw out there before we bounce out of here?
No, I'm good. Just enjoy the game on Sunday.
All right, we will. And we'll talk to you guys on Monday on our Dolphins Squad Show after the Super Bowl. And man, I hate the feeling that I got with the New England Patriots. It makes me sick to my stomach. I really have never hoped in my life. I've never hoped I'm wrong more than I do with this pick. But I just kind of feel with all the disrespect and everything that whole organization is going to rally together and pull off another one of their stupid Super Bowl wins that nobody ever expects them to get.
No, Gries, you're going down.
I hope so. Believe me, I really do. Thank you, Z. Thank you, Kyle. Keep coming back. Locked On Dolphins podcast on YouTube. And then, of course, this show, we're live. Then we upload, you download Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, and anywhere you get your podcasts. And, of course, we're on Roku as well. Shout out to all the people watching us on TV and on the web worldwide. Thanks to the everydayers, all you newbies as well. Keep on watching, keep on listening to your Dolphin Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 podcast network in the world, and your team every day. For Z and Kyle, I'm Gries. Keep your game tight and your mind right. We'll see you Monday.